Welcome back to Channels Television, continuing coverage of the Anambra State Governorship election live from Awka, the state capital, where we've been monitoring the process and the exercise as we speak. The State Collation Center is yet to open. Of course, we have been updating you to the fact that almost all of the results have so far been uploaded on IREV, the polling unit results, about 95% from what we see available to us on IREV, which you can also access at your time. But we'll continue the conversation with observers who have been observing the process. We just finished talking with some of the observers as well as the CP in charge of this election, Nabayomi Shogunle, who we commended for the efforts of the police so far in their deployment or in their ensuring that peace is maintained. But joining us right here in our studio in Awka is Samson Itodo, Executive Director, YIAGA Africa. Mr. Sam, thank you so much for coming on the program.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, I know it's been a long day.
Very long day.
And it's not over.
It's not yet.
It's not
yet.
over. Amina Zakaria is also joining us. She's a board member of TAF Africa. Thank you so much for coming on the program.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Samson, so we've talked about a lot of things, and so I want to explore a lot more angles. But I like to. We've been on the field together. We saw what happened there, but you expanded your reach. Your people are all over the place. Talk to us about the reports you got, and what are they?
Well, Geoffrey, preceding this election, there were 3 tests that underpinned this election. The first one was the efficiency test, and it's to what extent INEC will manage the logistics for this election, because historically, Anambra is known for having late commencement of elections. In fact, in the last election in 2021, it was at 7:30, only 17% of polling units recorded early arrival of polling officials. And at YIAGA Africa, which is part of a broader civil society effort, we deployed observers to a random sample of polling units. So our data is representative. So as at 7:30 a.m. this morning, polling officials had arrived in 49% of polling units. What that tells you is that there's a marked improvement between 2021 and 2025, that INEC did improve in its logistic deployment with respect to commencement of elections. So there's a marked improvement from 17% in 2021 to 49%. It's a marked improvement, even though we had expected that it would even go higher than that. But you also see cases where there are still some shortages, there are still some delays in some of the polling units. So to a large extent, we can say so far that INEC appears to be meeting the efficiency test. You can also see that on the IREV, as at now, over 90% of results are already on the IREV. That also tells you that it speaks to the efficiency of the Electoral Commission. The second relates to the impartiality, which is 4 security agencies. And I dare say that, yes, we commend the security agencies. This election, was conducted in a very peaceful and safe environment. We have to commend the people of Anambra. I think the last critical point is the integrity test. We cannot speak to that at the moment because the collation processes are on. Once the collation processes conclude, YIAGA Africa will issue our own verification statement. But I can say with a high degree of confidence that at YIAGA Africa, we already have the results from our sampled polling units, and our confidence level is high. But we would wait for INEC to announce the winner before we issue our final statement to verify. If the results are altered in the course of these collation processes, we are going to be able to detect it. But one thing I can say with a high degree of confidence, that even though the voter turnout is still very low, but the voter turnout for this election will be higher than the 10% that was recorded in 2021. But for this election, it will still be higher than that. Will be somewhere between either 19 or 21 or 20%, that range. We're still cleaning up the data. But I can confirm that the turnout for this election will be higher than 2021. However, it will still be very low because it would not cross even the 25% mark.
So I know you had projected 20%, or less than 20%. So that sounds like a good thing, even if no matter how minimal it is.
That's right.
Let's come back to you, Ms. Amina. You are wearing a couple of caps, but I want to speak to you from the point of a former national commissioner of INEC. And I want you to assess the exercise from what you have seen. You now observe things. You've been there when you were the ones whose people put fire to their feet, but now you're the one now putting fire to the commission's feet. Tell us what you've seen.
Well, I think there's so much. It seems organized. The election seems to have gone very well. It's been peaceful, but naturally, Anambra has not been as not peaceful as other states, but it's been more peaceful than we've had in the earlier elections. And people have conducted themselves well, even though we've had pockets of incidences of complaints of vote buying, but so far it has not turned into a violent activity. So for me, I think it's been quite peaceful, it's been organized, and I've just gone through some of the IREV sheets. I've seen very neat reporting. Yeah, the uploads are very neat, so it's kind of comforting to know that possibly there will be no cancellation, no mutilation so far from what I've seen, and I'm quite impressed by and I'm quite impressed with the logistics too, with the early commencement of the elections, because we've had very difficult times in 2017. It was very difficult in 2021. It was difficult. But this time we haven't had reports of adverse delays in commencement of the polls. So by and large, I wish to commend INEC on this. It's a very good improvement, and I wish we can further improve on what we have.
Let me raise some of the issues I'd raised with other guests on the program. And you mentioned it in passing, but let me start with you, Mr. Itodo. Somebody had said here, I think it was somebody from the Situation Room had mentioned that, look, there was vote buying, but she doesn't believe, or maybe in her view, she thinks that whether people were selling their vote or their vote being bought doesn't really affect anything. Is that a view you share? And how much of that did you see, did you witness, or did your people report? How widespread was it?
Yeah, so in the statement that, the Election Observation Hub, comprising of 7 organizations, including TAF Africa, issued this afternoon, we did confirm that there were cases of vote buying. In fact, our observation clearly reveals that the perpetrators of this offense are devising new methods, very covert methods of buying votes. They are not coming to the polling stations with cash anymore. What you're seeing is that political mercenaries, are taking the records of voters after casting their votes and scheduling them for post-voting inducement.
How do they do that?
Well, it's simple. Of course, if you look at the whole setup, in certain cases, there's a violation of the secrecy of the vote. The way the cubicles were set up, and they were set up in a way that people could expose, their votes, because the agents are there and they are watching. Beyond the party agents, there are also other supporters who are watching to be sure, to confirm that you actually thumbprinted for their candidates. We also see cases where POS were also used, for procuring votes. So yes, it did happen. I think as an election observer, it's not within our remit to determine what could have been the choices of people, because we're not involved in conducting perception surveys or exit polls. We're not interested in voting choices. What we are interested in is the process for which, voters exercise their franchise, ensuring that that process is transparent, is credible, and is devoid of any form of infirmity. So that's that's our preoccupation. And once that process is transparent, then you can say that the overall outcome is a reflection of the will of the people, and that it is not a procured outcome, but that people have made this choice, conscious of the consequence of whatever choice that they make. So to a large extent, we would say that yes, there were cases of vote buying, But the INEC chairman, prior to this election, had mentioned consistently, the point about vote buying, including the security agencies. And the bigger question is, yes, we saw the EFCC, we saw other security agencies, and how come there haven't been any arrest, despite the fact that one issue that resonates with all the election observers is this point about vote buying, but we haven't seen any arrests. So it really calls for, greater enforcement or perhaps enactment of stiffer laws that helps regulate this kind of deviant political behavior.
Madam Zachary, you've been on the commission, and the question around the inability to curb vote buying. This is 2025. I see vote buying as bending the curve, bending the line, one way or the other. Whether it's significant or not is a different matter altogether. Why is it difficult to curb?
I think the problem is there's a disconnect between policy and implementation. While the policy makers give out the rules on how to operate at the lower level, when you come to the lower level, implementation is gone off trajectory, possibly because they get intimidated. Sometimes the staff get intimidated. Sometimes they actually put the cubicles in such a way that the votes don't show. Somewhere along the way, somebody turns the cubicles.
Sorry for cutting. How should the cubicle be positioned? Because I noticed the way it was positioned at the polling unit where I was. How should it be positioned? If you can give like a description, if you will.
It should be positioned away from the crowd, a bit away from the crowd, but with adequate security. And the box should be positioned close to the cubicle so that you can just drop it.
Yes, sir.
Meanwhile, we could also think outside the box and make some enclosure for these cubicles. We've been talking about this vote buying since maybe 2013. I think 2013, it was here we first noticed the vote buying. It became glaring in 2016 in Edo. Then it became, now it's more brazen and open. There's even a negotiation, a haggling. How much are you willing to pay? How much am I willing to take? Besides educating the public, I think we need to do more. Maybe we should move these cubicles maybe into the classrooms or into an exclosure. I remember when we were young, the elections we held in the 80s, there was like some thatch enclosure or zinc enclosures where you went in to vote. Nobody saw your vote. So if maybe INEC should move to that, or maybe the nation should find a way of making these cubicles enclosed.
The rule is that nobody should see how you voted.
Yes.
They will see even the candidates breaking that rule. I think I even saw the governor today display. What do you make of all of
Education.
that? Is it excitement? Is it, I did voted for my, what exactly is going on here?
Impunity.
Yeah.
That's just it. It's just impunity. Because the candidate feels...
Remember, let Muhammad Buhari did it as well.
Because, exactly. Because if the president can do it, because he feels he's above the law, and there will be no consequence for that action, they will continue to do it. That's why you need stiffer provisions in our legal framework, in the Electoral Act, that goes beyond criminalizing this, but actually imposing stiffer sanctions. Because what you currently have in the Electoral Act talks about bribery and conspiracy. We have to construct or construe our legislation in a way that it properly defines what, is vote buying and vote selling, and also prescribe sanctions for them. Of course, in addition to, this continuous public education, because we actually need to continue to educate people. Because if you record this level of turnout, which is, less than 25%, and there was still this rate of vote buying, something does not add up here. And I think that we need to go beyond, this sort of conversation to really take in stronger actions against people who sell and people who buy.
Let's talk about ballot paper handling. I remember that was, when you look at someone, I think it was in 2021, when we look at the number of invalid votes. As far as elections are concerned. But because, for instance, Mr. Tode has mentioned this over and over again, the state spent a lot of money to print these ballot papers and put all of this together. First, people will not show up. And then you show up, you mess up the paper. So what else can be done to make sure that that is also minimized as much as possible? Because I'm saying this on the backdrop of there's voter apathy. That's one layer of reducing the number. And then you now further reduce the number. Because let's even say we're impressed with 20%. What is 20% of the total number of votes? At the end of the day, this election may be decided by maybe 500,000 people, 400,000 people, as against 2.8 million. Now, we can even make it worse, as against over 5 million people who are people of Anambra State. So talk to us about it.
Well, I think I will borrow from some about the lack of education, lack of motivation by the political parties, because they are supposed to mobilize. They are supposed to motivate. Good governance motivates. They are supposed to mobilize people to vote. They are supposed to make it like a festivity of some sorts. Get the people to come out and vote. INEC can only do so much. INEC keeps doing voter education, also mobilization, but it's not the work of INEC to mobilize. It's the work of the political parties to mobilize. And if there's good governance, people will be willing to come out and vote for a particular person. I don't know, I can't see why you spend years piling up money for vote buying rather than providing good governance that will make people want you to even have a third term, if possible. Because some people are so good, some public will start saying, maybe we need a third term, something like that. But we don't see that in Nigeria. We don't see that. We see the political parties are just there for candidature. You know, you just get a candidature, you get voted, and that's the end of it. The parties are dead for the next 4 years. Even within the lower level, there's just one party in this state. They need to work harder in motivating and mobilizing people to come out and vote. Anambra is really a bad case of poor turnout. I think it's one of the worst in the country.
That we have.
Yeah, it's one of the worst. So this 20%, we're excited, but it's really not a good starting point.
Let me come to you, Mr. Todo. The question is a straight why. If a state has been consistently turning out low voter numbers, election in and out, with the worst in recent history, which was the last one, we're hoping for an improvement this time. But this improvement is actually catching up with the previous one, so it's not as if we're doing anything extraordinary. Without going into anything specific, what exactly, in your view, is responsible?
I think there are several factors that may be responsible. The first one is about culture. And the question is there a voting culture
in Anambra?
In Anambra? The other question is, and you need to situate this also within the broader national question. Whether, the people of Anambra do feel that the politics of Nigeria, has brought any development to them, and what's really in it for them. And you clearly see that even if, and I've said this repeatedly, that compared to other states, when you think about electoral fraud and irregularity, Anambra seems to be doing better than some states. So when you say your vote will not count, Anambra is not really a state where we can say votes don't count, given elections. So maybe it's the question about socialization, and it's the politicians, are they really speaking the language that people want to understand? And then also whether the parties are presenting candidates that can excite, voters to show up to vote. And the other thing is the fact that for a lot of people, if governance, they don't feel the impact of governance, there's no way they're going to participate in the process. And I think that, especially for a state like this, prior to this election, everything, was provided for voters, to cast their vote. Yes, in places like Ihala or other riverine areas, or places that were ravaged by some level of insecurity, you can say there are threats, in those locations. But there was also massive deployment, in those locations. So I think that we have to, as a country, really think about this issue about turnout, because it's got some implication for democratic legitimacy. Again, the minority in Anambra are going to determine for the majority.
Yet again.
Yet again. And that is an anomaly. But it's not just Anambra. If you look at this nationally, the minority, because you only recorded 25% turnout in the presidential elections. So just a few, just 25% of Nigerians determined for the other 75% of us. I think that as a country, we need to consider this a national emergency, and we should be bothered that people are not showing up, to cast their vote. And I'll put this at the doorsteps of the politicians, because they are the beneficiaries of this vote. They need to rethink their political mobilization strategy, speak the language that people want, present candidates that can excite people, and then debate issues and not, exploit those flawed lines when it's time for elections.
Madam Zachary, the issue of crisis of confidence bedevils our institution. Now, as much as we blame the political parties, which some of them, like anything that will undermine the system is their forte. If some of them, if the system works, they will not succeed. But INEC has its own issues as well. From where you sit and what you've known as sitting inside of INEC, what has to be done for the people to trust INEC yet again? Because we've seen in some part INEC really make those efforts. We've seen their failures. We've also seen effort.
Yeah, INEC has made a lot of effort, and as I always say, INEC never intends to fail when we plan for these elections. There's no intention for failure. It's just that there's so many factors affecting the election, and it's not just INEC that runs the election. Remember, there's security agencies, there's the ad hoc staff, there's so many other components of the election. Even the press is part of the election. So if those are not doing well and are not supportive enough of INEC, there's only so much INEC can do. Even though INEC can still take stock, there's a chance to take stock after every election and improve on what has gone wrong. Sometimes INEC also kind of goes to sleep on some fundamental issues, even though there's a lot of improvement in terms of technology and systems. But I think they need to do more in terms of training their staff. That disconnect between policy and implementation is very glaring. We always had to correct issues on the field because they are not aware of what the policy was supposed to be. So they need, those 4 years, they need to continuously train their staff and make their staff as efficient as the headquarters. At the same time, the EOs that keep replacing ad hoc staff, I heard on TV that some of the staff were being taught at the table. That means they were replaced. They never went through training. So we need to sanction those kind of EOs. We get these reports. Unfortunately, there's no sanctioning in INEC. After the election, once there is a euphoria, somebody has won and you people praise INEC for a good job done, everything goes to sleep because there's no sanctions, no reward structure. So they need to introduce sanctions and reward structure. That will get the staff up and about. Some EOs don't deploy. They've got the money, they don't deploy the vehicles. NURTW may be there, but they don't, instead of 10 vehicles, they take 6. No sanctions. So they need to sanction those staff that have.
We have just about 4 or 5 minutes to wrap up. So one more question is in 2 minutes. So this, I always say this is the most important hour when it comes to the election, or one of the most important hours, which has to do with the collation exercise. I don't think the state collation has opened yet from the, I've been working my gadgets to find out exactly what's happening, and nothing yet. But how do we get to a point, Samson, where we can, after elections that we've all gone to the field to witness, we should just go to sleep. But you can't go to, this is the time, this is the worst time to go to sleep right now, this hour.
Yeah. Actually, this is the worst time. You know, yes, these elections seem to have gone well. I'm very optimistic that the collation will go well. But you see, this election was not as competitive as it should have been. And if the actual test, especially even for the security agencies, is think about it. If it was an election where indeed, you know, the federal might is determined, you know, to sway the outcome of the elections, that is when our institutions will be put to serious test. And I'll be looking forward to how those institutions respond in an election that is highly competitive. And I think one of those elections next year, just states like Osun, are the kinds of elections that we'll be looking at, also Ekiti. But I think that INEC deserves commendation so far. But again, we're in the very crucial moments, and we'll be watching over this. Like I mentioned, YIAGA Africa already have the results from the sample polling units, and we'll release our final statement once INEC issues its results.
30 seconds. How inclusive was this election? How inclusive?
Well, we've seen some improvement because we've been tracking, and thank God Jake is not sleeping. we have been tracking. We've seen how the elderly, the sick and the pregnant women have been given attention ahead of other voters. We've seen how disabled people have been assisted. So by and large, we're coming of age in terms of inclusivity.
Fantastic. Samson Itodo, Executive Director, YIAGA Africa, Amina Zakaria, Board Member of TAF Africa, and a former National Commissioner of INEC. Thank you, Madam.
And
thank you.
Thanks. Always a delight. Thank you.
It's not over yet.
Yes.
Until it's over.